Hello, cosplay world! Today we're going to be making some fairly simple armor sets. These are all partials and they're not jointed, so they're not particularly difficult to make fit on someone. I would say like a full plate set of armor requires a bit more practice, but if you're looking for a easier set of armor, this is a good starting point because it's mostly plates. So this is for Morgan, I believe, Moonstar. I know it's Moonstar, I don't know her first name. Alright, it's been a while. So, a large portion of this armor is going to be made with PVC foam sheeting. This is a semi-rigid material that you can heat up and thermoform. You can do similar results with, say, Warbler or foam. It'll just be a different texture. You'll have to re-texture it, and it will be much more expensive. PVC foam sheeting is about $1 a square foot, and it's a smooth surface to start off with, so it's for me a much preferable material choice. It is a little bit more difficult for regular cosplayers to get a hold of, it seems, but you can order it online at, say, Taps Plastics or US Plastics, or your local actual sign shop will have this material on stock. It'll be more because you're buying it from a wholesaler, but it's easier and you don't have to deal with shipping, which is a big deal when you buy sheet material. So have a look around and hopefully you can find it for yourself. I'm encouraging you to do so. So we've already templated all these pieces out off camera. I did all the drafting work and things like that. And we're beginning to cut each piece out. The preferred tools here, I'm going to say, are my saw for large straight cuts. The longer the blade, the more you can get the profile of it into the cut, and so you get less deviation. If I were to use something like a box cutter, I could easily waver around a lot more, whereas with my good long saw blade, it's harder. Anyway, so once we have the base pieces cut out, there are some curved sections. My Japanese dovetail saw allows me to do some fairly nice, even, graduated curves. But if you have some detail work, I recommend the hot knife. Hot knife works amazingly well on most soft plastics. I think acrylics you're not going to get as much luck with. You're going to need much more heavy-duty tools. But for a lot of your thermoplastics, a hot knife is a good tool to own. So we have them all cut out here. We're going to start with the easiest pieces, which is the thigh plates, and we are going to be layering several of them over each other here. Simply heating up the piece until it gets to the consistency of, say, leather, like heavy leather, hard leather, not fashion grade. So it's going to get soft basically, and then you're going to be able to form it for a period of time while it's warm. Once it cools off, it's going to hold the shape that we put it in. For the spikes, we simply have a bit of actually just scraps here to make them a little bit more interesting, a little bit more distinct. And we are going to be curving them as well. When you create a curve in this material, it actually strengthens it a bit. It gives it a bit more dynamic shape, and it holds shape a bit better. It's less wobbly, if that makes sense. If it's curved, it kind of supports itself once you start creating things like domes. So, to actually get these spikes into place, we've cut slits where they're going to be positioned, and we're heating those specific spaces up. Now you don't necessarily need to cut a channel for the pass through. Because the material is thermoformable, it will stretch and allow the piece to pass through, thus making it a little easier to actually do and makes the fit pretty tight. There will be a bit of material left over in the spike, about 1 inch or so. I recommend heating that up and pressing against the inside and gluing that down. That's what's actually going to be holding in place. Is on the inside we're going to have the base of the spike glued in place with the point sticking outwards. Now, I recommend that you try not to get too sharp of a point with PVC foam sheeting. The one thing about it is it's not as flexible, and so if it snaps off or takes a hit, it's more likely to break than, say, EVA foam or Warbler. So that's the kind of trade-off here. PVC foam sheeting tends to break when you do things like horns or really, really pointy things or elaborate scrolls. But as long as you have it based or backed up on something, it does amazing details all on its own. It's also really good for layering work as well, because it has a range of thicknesses between half a millimeter, 1 millimeter. I typically use 3 millimeter. That's an 1/8 inch. That's the common thickness you'll find. But you can get it all the way up to 3/4 or 7/8 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch. I think it's 3/4 of an inch. But I wouldn't recommend 3/4 of an inch. At that point, you may as well be using like wood. Whatever you're doing, you probably want to do wood if you have that thick of PVC. 1/4 inch PVC foam sheeting is good for a lot of structural work if you want to do a lot of stuff that requires screws but is a complex shape. I don't recommend PVC sheeting for things that are flat. The point of this material is that you're able to shape it. So if you don't need to shape it, there are other materials on hand that will do similar things but will be more structurally sound. If you want it to be more flexible, more bouncy, there are also good choices as well. So it's all about figuring out how you want the material or your costume to perform overall. In this case, I want it to be like plate armor, and because I don't want to actually run around in I guess aluminum, you would probably get a lot of like aluminum ductwork and plate it out, but I don't really want to do that. I don't want to run around with actual metal. This is the second best thing as far as I can tell to make armor with if you want to look like plate, because it behaves very much like plate mail as well. Okay, so we're back to cutting things out again. But by the way, a large portion of this is going to be done in exactly the same tool set. You don't need a whole lot to work with it. The hot knife and the saw and the box cutter will get a majority of your work done, and your primary shaping tool is going to be the heat gun. However, we are going to be mounting these particular sections to a boot, and mounting flexible material to an inflexible material can be a little tricky. So what we're going to be doing in this case is making some plates, something for the armor to stick to in order for it to properly attach. So what I'm doing is I make a inch wide by say 2-inch long little plates, and we're going to be sewing those directly to the boot. Now, PVC foam sheeting doesn't sew very well because it's plastic. So in order for it to be sewable, we're going to be drilling several holes in it and then hand stitching through those plates. So we're kind of creating a kind of, well, maybe like a button or like a base plate, sewing it down, and then the glue that you use with plastics or whatever you happen to have on hand. I recommend the specialty glue, Well On 2007, or whatever plastic glue you can get at your local hobby shop. And we're going to be gluing plastic to plastic. And the hand stitch plate method allows for enough flexibility that you won't stress out the material while still being able to securely attach it to the piece. Sometimes you might want to use something like a rivet, but in this case we don't want to show the hardware. We want it to be a nice clean finish on the surface, so we're going to be sewing it down because that's a much lower profile for us here. As you can see, once we do have them mounted in place, we are going to be wrapping the, I guess, rib cage, it kind of looks like, around the piece. Now, on the inside of the boot where the zipper is, we're not going to actually be sewing that down. We want that free because we're going to be coming and getting in and out of that space. We want to have a bit of flexibility there. So don't worry, PVC foam sheeting is a bit flexible, so you can absolutely open and close it reasonably easily. I just wouldn't smash it because unlike Warbler or EVA foam, it can, like, it's hard. It'll break eventually if you put enough pressure on it. There you go. Now, for the spikes here, we are going to be doing a similar trick. We are going to put a bit of a base sewn into the boot, and then we are going to attach the spikes to it. In this case, we're using Instamorph. It's like a bunch of plastic beads that we heat up and turn into a glob. It's extremely hard. It's one of the hardest materials I use as far as thermoformable materials. So it's really good for hardware or things that need structural support. In this case, they're going to be holding on to the spikes. Now, one thing I will recommend for spikes is that you kind of have a loose fit on them so that you're able to take a hit and it deflects away. Like I said earlier, the PVC sheeting will snap on the tips. I would rather it kind of deflect away if hit, especially because it's on the boot, than to break off entirely. We're going to continue this at finalcosplaycore.com, the rest of the video here. The next project that's going to go up next week is going to be Shira's sword. I hope you guys stick around. I hope you guys checked out those videos. Thanks for watching. Good times to all. Hurrah! Your support means so much. Thank you.